Hey guys, it's been a long time since we did a video for the Woman of God series, so really happy to be back to that. As you can see, I have moved again. Still working on putting things away and getting the full setup. I eventually plan to put my backdrop over here and to record facing this way, but you know, I wanted to go ahead and record a video while I can. Since I've been making you guys wait so long for this video. So today we're going to talk about Rahab. Now, usually when I do these videos, I show you guys me making the notes at the end of the video and we just go through during the video. But today I think I'm going to insert in right here the footage of me making the journal so I can do like some voiceover stuff of why I wanted to come back with Rahab and why it took me so long to continue with the Woman of God series. And then we'll jump into the actual notes. So just a little departure from the usual. But anyway, I really enjoy the series, despite the fact that it's been neglected in 2023. A lot of my inspiration for creating the Woman of God series was just that I felt like there's so many people out here telling women how we should be and critiquing women. And a lot of the things that I hear didn't sound actually biblical. They sound more like man-made traditions. And so part of it was me wanting to share where those differences are between what society is teaching and passing off as biblical, even though it's not necessarily biblical, but also for myself to go back and study and see where I may be missing things, where maybe God is telling me to be a certain way and I am failing to do so because I've been listening to what the world is telling us is okay or not okay, etc., etc. And going up to this point that I was thinking about doing this, I think that's around the time I first was introduced to what the internet calls the red pill community or the manosphere. And then a lot of guys that I know, particularly the guys in the church, started to also like co-sign a lot of that uh, conversation. That's how we'll put it. And then I realized that social media and the internet were basically just rapid fire providing this content for the masses. I would go on YouTube and I would be seeing, if not videos by direct manosphere and red pill content creators, then reactions to that content. And I would go on like Facebook and people would be posting the videos or commenting on it. And it seemed like everywhere I went, I was seeing this content. And then, of course, because we all know in physics, it tells us that for every action, there is an opposite but equal reaction. So I'm not really sure which came first, but in the midst of this, I also started seeing the opposite content from, female influencers who were going in the complete opposite direction and basically, saying that men weren't this and men weren't that. And I was really sad. I don't think there's any other word to say it, but to see that men and women were just so far apart. And then on one of my videos here on YouTube, somebody who I assume is probably from that very conservative male community, left a series of comments on one of the videos, or actually a lot of the videos. They're still there because I don't really believe in deleting and censoring people. But I read these comments and was like, whoa, what is this? And I just felt very distraught. I don't know. I felt very emotionally drained, very upset. And I really just didn't want to think about it. I was like, where are the people who have good sense? The people who understand the middle ground, that there are men and there are women and that we are created to come together and that that's supposed to be a beautiful thing, et cetera, et cetera. Like, where are these people? And I was very, very distraught that I couldn't seem to see that anywhere in our society. And I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to think about relationships. I didn't want to think about men. I didn't want to think about women. I didn't want to think about how women were supposed to behave and how how we related to men or how men related to women. I just wanted to think about happy things. I wanted to go in my bubble and think about happy thoughts. So that made it kind of hard to film the Women of God series. When you throw in the fact that I was moving and I was here and there, and my apartment wasn't really conducive to filming anything, it just kind of got tossed to the side. Back in, I think, July, maybe January, somewhere in that time, I did a poll asking like what videos you guys wanted to see when I started back making videos. And this series was the clear winner. And I wasn't really surprised because I also enjoy these videos. But I was just like, oh man, that means I got to get it together and I got to go back into it. So I was praying about like what I should talk about and where I should go next. And to be honest, my first thought was to go with the Daughters of Zelophehad. I don't know why, but that was on my mind. That was originally the video that I was trying to work on to come back. And then God came down, as he always does, and was like, nope, you're going to talk about Rahab. And the moment he put Rahab's name in my head, I was like, oh God, you are a genius. You know what you're doing. Let's go. Let's go with what you have told me to do. So we're talking about Rahab today because Rahab is the person that we didn't know we needed to learn about. Rahab is the woman we all needed to learn about that we just did not realize we needed to learn about. So my overhead camera literally just died. I don't know if you heard the click a couple of minutes ago. So I'm going to, do I want to keep going or do I want to plug it in and come back to film the content with the video? I think I'm just going to take pictures and put it in because we have the filming of me like actually doing the spread, and I don't think that's gonna detract. Okay, we're gonna keep going and I'll figure out how to insert the footage later. We'll worry about that later. So Rahab, sorry guys, I am flipping it over for my own notes. But for those who are not familiar with Rahab, she's often referred to as Rahab the prostitute, which really does not do justice to her. And we're going to get into that in a minute too. But Rahab was a harlot or a prostitute that was living in the city of Jericho. And when the Israelites crossed over the Jordan and started to take the land of Canaan, this is where they started. So they go and they're gonna attack Jericho. And so Joshua's like, we need to get intel. So he sends spies into the land of Jericho to get this intel. And somehow these spies ended up at Rahab's house. Now, I don't know if they ended up there because they were trying to get service or if Rahab sought them out and was like, hey, you can come stay at my house. Or if they thought that that would be the best place for them to hide, because who's looking for, military spies at a prostitute's house? I don't really know. We're not told why the spies went to Rahab, but they end up at Rahab's house, and Rahab becomes their saving grace because Rahab confesses that she knows that God is the Lord. She knows that he is the creator, and she's heard about what he did in Egypt, and she knows that the Israelites have been given this land and that they're going to take the people out. And she wants to be on the side of God. So when the king finds out that these spies are at Rahab's house, she lies to the king and tells him, no, like they left, they went this way. and sends the king and his men on a wild goose chase. Meanwhile, she is actually hiding them in her house, and then she helps them get out of the city safely so that they can get back to the Israelite army and share the intel that they've collected. Now, in the process of all of this, after she saves them, she also bargains with them to get her freedom, of course. She's like, so when you guys come back and start killing up people, remember me. Don't kill me. Don't kill my family. Like, me and my father's house, will you save us? And they're like, yeah, okay. So they come up with this idea that Rahab will use this scarlet rope that is coincidentally also the thing that she uses to lower them out of a window of her house when they're fleeing. She will use that rope. She'll hang it out of the window, and anybody that is within her house will be saved, will be spared during the war, during the battle, and her family will be okay. But if they leave, then that's on them, right? Guys, tell me that does not sound like the Passover. Like in the Exodus in Egypt, the Israelites killed the lamb and put the blood of the lamb, the red scarlet blood of the lamb, over the door, and death passed over the house. Everyone inside the house with the red on the door was spared. Now they're coming into the land of Canaan, and this Canaanite woman, remember, women often represent churches symbolically in the Bible, like the bride of Christ. So this woman, this Canaanite woman, non-Israelite woman, is saying is that she will put a red mark out of her window, and when they start killing and taking the city, they will pass over her house and all that are in her house and allow them to live. That's key. But anyway, that is exactly what happens. When they come back, they skip over her house, and her family are left alive. We are only left to assume that her and her family end up assimilating into the Israelites and the Israelite culture, because later in the book of Matthew, Rahab shows up in the lineage of Christ. Not just any lineage, y'all. Rahab is the mother of Boaz. Yeah, y'all, everybody telling you to wait on your Boaz. Rahab raised Boaz. Rahab, the prostitute, Rahab the harlot, raised Boaz. And subsequently, that also makes her an ancestor for David and Solomon and every king that sat on the throne of Judah, with the exception of Saul, of course. The entire Davidic, can't talk. That entire line comes from Rahab. And of course, that comes all the way down to our Messiah, who is also a descendant of Rahab. So the reason I think that is someone we should be talking about more, at the beginning I said most people refer to her as Rahab the prostitute. And until I started doing this study, I probably would have done the same thing. I said, yeah, Rahab the prostitute. That's probably the first thing that came into my head as well. And I stopped and I thought about it while I was doing the study, and I was like, nobody refers to David as David the adulterer or David the murderer. They usually say David the king of Israel or David the man after God's heart. Nobody refers to Paul as Paul the murderer. It's Paul the apostle, Paul the man who went out and preached the gospel to the Gentiles, right? Nobody refers to Noah as the drunk. It's Noah who survived the flood. But Rahab is always referred to as Rahab the prostitute, not Rahab the savior or the helper, or Rahab the co-conspirator, right? Rahab the mother of Boaz, right? People don't really recognize her for her contribution to them literally winning a battle. Rahab helped them win a battle and went against her king and her nation to help the Israelite army, but all people reduced her to being a prostitute. And this is where I felt like God was really, really wanting me to talk about her and to share it in the midst of all of this, men are this, women are that, men should be this, women should be that content that is floating around on the internet. There are a lot of people who reduce women to their past. Men too. There are women who reduce men to their past. It goes both ways. But in a lot of this content, you hear a lot of people talking about women as though they lose value, whether it's because they've aged, but primarily based on, for instance, their body count, whether they are pure, whether they're a virgin. And you see this not just in like red pill and manosphere content, but also in purity culture. And there are a lot of women, particularly Christian women, who have expressed that they felt worthless because they had been assaulted, because they had made different decisions in life and had, had a past. They have a body count. And they felt like because of that, they didn't deserve a good husband. They didn't deserve real love or respect or whatever. And Rahab says something totally different, y'all. Rahab was a whole prostitute. And she had a house. I highly doubt that Rahab was prostituting out her dad's house. I don't know about your dad, but my dad would kill me if that's what I was doing. So there is no way that, I just can't imagine that being the thing. I feel like she had to have her own space. My mom would not be okay with me being a prostitute either. So I am pretty sure that Rahab was staying on her own. And it says they went to the harlot's house. It doesn't say, they went to the house where Rahab stays, right? It's possessive as though it's her house. And I'm making a big deal out of that because that means she owned a house. She bought a house. Houses used to be cheaper in the US. I assume they used to be cheaper in Canaan as well. But it's always been difficult for a woman to get a house. And if you think about what it takes to buy a house today, it ain't no small feat to come up with the money to buy a house. It ain't no small feat to come up with the money to pay rent. So how much money was Rahab making as a prostitute to have her own house? I'm just saying, y'all, she either had a really high body count because she had a lot of money to have this house. She either had a high body count or she was only servicing wealthy men, which I guess in today's society we would call high value men. All right, so Rahab was out here getting it in and she had money. But that's not how God saw Rahab. God did not reduce Rahab to simply being a prostitute. God saw that she had faith. She had faith that he was who he said he was. And she took a chance to follow him. Now, I would assume that Rahab did not continue to prostitute after she joined the nation of Israel, after she married her husband and, had Boaz. I imagine that she, got back on track. But it says a lot about how God used her anyway. And not only did God use her, his people didn't cast her aside. And this man wasn't like, oh, you're not worthless. You're worthless. You don't deserve marriage. You don't deserve anything. You're still going to be a prostitute in Israel because that's all you're worth. She was married into a good family, and that family produced kings, right? There is a level of respect that was given and that is due to Rahab that contradicts everything people are saying in the red pill community, in the manosphere community, in these very conservative traditionalist communities, because there is this idea of putting women down based on one thing or two things or whatever. And it's very clear that that wasn't the case. Rahab was still a valuable human being. Rahab still had worth. And it was her faith that defined her. She had the ability to not be a prostitute. She chose not to be one, right? But she did at one time. But that didn't make her less of a woman. That didn't make her less of a hero in the story. It doesn't make her less of a good mother for Boaz. We know she raised Boaz, right? Because we see how Boaz is with Ruth when we get to the book of Ruth. There's so much beauty in seeing that she wasn't what people would call perfect. She's not what people typically would say is the Proverbs 31 woman, though she does have attributes. The Proverbs 31 woman also has land and a field. She also was able to buy things. The difference is how she got her money was probably not prostituting, but they both were businesswomen of sorts. But they both end up having children that love them, that respect them, and they are faithful to their husbands, and they end up doing great things. They just started in a different place. It doesn't matter where you started. It matters that you have the faith and you give that faith to God. You surrender yourself to God. You surrender whatever that beginning is to God, and that He will take you the rest of the way. And I thought that was a powerful message and a powerful thing to think about. So if you also are being bombarded by all of this negativity, I want you to think about Rahab. Because Rahab was more than a prostitute. Rahab was a hero. Rahab was faithful. So I'm not going to be referring to her as Rahab the prostitute anymore. I'm going to call her Rahab the hero. Or I'm going to call her Rahab from Jericho. Or Rahab the mother of Boaz. Or Rahab the faithful. Because she was a whole lot more. And she deserves to be remembered as a whole lot more. So welcome back to the Women of God series. I hope to be better at continuing this series. And I will see you guys soon. Bye.